Today's video is part one of a mixed media portrait that I'm doing. This first week I'm just concentrating on transferring my original drawing over to my artwork, then masking off an area that I don't want touched by my airbrush, which I'm going to be using in the background. So let's get to it. For this piece, I've started off by tracing my original drawing onto some tracing paper, and then I've gone over the back of it with a pastel pencil over where all the lines are, so that now I can place this onto my paper that I'm going to be working on and then trace over it again with I'm using a nail art dotting tool and going over all the lines and transferring my image that way onto my paper. I haven't drawn on the paper itself because I want to keep that as clean as possible for my artwork. So all the mistakes I made while drawing this, I've done on a separate piece of paper. And I'm just coming through now on this piece to sort out those lines and to transfer everything across. Now, the reason I'm not using my normal transfer paper is that graphite paper leaves quite a dark line, and I don't want any dark lines that I can't easily fade out on this piece, because a lot of it is going to be in colour pencil. All the girl is going to be in colour pencil on this one, so I need to be able to lighten up those lines. That's the word I'm after, sorry about that. I need to be able to lighten up those lines easily, which I find I can't quite do with the graphite transfer paper. So once I'm done with that and I've got all my lines, I can remove that tracing paper. I can keep that for later in case I need to go over any of my lines, but for now that's done with. And I'm going to cover this whole drawing with a product called Frisket. Now this is a very, very low tack tape. All I'm going to do is tape it over my drawing. It won't damage my paper at all. I mean, I just draw on it and then take it straight off as soon as I've finished, so it's not on the paper for all that long, but I've never had a problem with it sticking down and damaging that paper, but I wouldn't recommend leaving it on for days and days and days at a time. Now, where my original sheet didn't quite fit, I've added another piece over, but I've made sure that I've slightly overlapped them. And the reason for this is that I'm going to be airbrushing and I don't want the paint to seep in the line and just leave me with a harsh line. So that's why. I'm now lightly going over with a craft knife to cut the excess Frisket away. So I'm going along the outer edge of my drawing with a craft knife ever so gently. And I'm removing that Frisket out the way so that it just leaves it with the girl. Now, unfortunately, my knife was a little bit too blunt on this one, so I had to change it for the second half of this. So just ever so gently cut that. You don't press too hard, otherwise you'll cut your paper and then you've ruined everything. You have to start again. But ever so gently, you can feel when it's cutting into the Frisket. I've not had a problem myself. So just nice and sharp craft knife and just a gentle hand. And there, I've got a few bits that bobbled up because my knife wasn't sharp enough. So I've changed my knife blade now and I'm back onto the other side, and the same again. I'm just going to cut around the outer edge. A nice smooth motion. I keep it as smooth as I possibly can because I don't want any jagged lines. I want it to stay true to the picture, because all I'm doing here is protecting the girl. Because I'm going to be using my airbrush, I don't want her to be covered in that airbrush paint, because it'll be very, very difficult to use my colour pencil over that. Now that that's done, I'm free to start airbrushing. I've protected my background and my drawing board with some tissue paper I've taped up as well. And as I said, the line drawing is now protected by that Frisket, so I don't have to be neat and tidy and worry about edges or anything like that. I can just paint over it. Now, as I'm going to be doing I'm trying to go for an autumn background here. I want it to look sort of like autumn leaves. I want it nice and blurry and out of focus. That's why I'm using the airbrush. So I've started off by layering down some green, and I'm making sure that I'm working side to side. I'm going horizontal for this because I still want the perspective to look right. If I went with vertical lines, then that would throw off my perspective and it'd look a bit odd. Once the green's down, I'm now going through with some titanium white, and I'm just doing little dots in clumps and clusters here and there. Slightly larger at the top of the picture, coming down to slightly more closer together, slightly smaller. I need to use white because I want to be able to paint over that with slightly brighter colours and yellows and oranges and things like that in a little bit. So in order to do that properly, I need to do the white first so that it will show over the green. I wanted the green down first because that is the base colour, and I didn't want to be fighting against the white of the paper on those sections. So it's easier to put that base colour down and then paint over it because it's acrylic paints. So you can do that so it's nice and easy. So you can already see that it sort of gives you a nice fuzzy look, and working sort of horizontally in close clumps and clusters is hopefully going to give me the look of leaves. As with all painting and pencil work, it is just a case of layering and layering and layering until it looks how I want it to look. I'm going to end up a lot darker than it is at the moment. I'm just adding some slightly brighter dots in there as well. And once I'm happy with the distribution of those, I will change up my colours and go for slightly more yellow tones. So now I've got a yellow ochre in my airbrush, and I'm just going to go over those white dots that I've already added. And just glaze a bit of that colour over where I've got the whites. And then when it hits the green, it's not really going to show that much, but it's going to give me different shades and variations of green throughout that background as well. So it saves me having to go in with numerous different greens. That yellow hitting the greens just changes up the colour slightly as I go. Again, keeping the airbrush fairly far away. I don't want it too close to the picture because then I'll get really, really sharp details in there. I don't want that. I just want it to be nice and fuzzy so that it looks like a blurred out background. I've now added a bit more of a slightly richer colour. A bit more of an orange shade is going on now. As I'm saying, just building up those layers horizontally as best I can to give the impression of an autumn scene behind my main portrait picture. With the airbrush as well, as you can see, I've been at the side just testing the colour before I put it onto my piece, just to make sure it's coming out as I want it, make sure my airbrush isn't spitting, and make sure that it's the colour saturation that I'm actually after. So coming in with some brown now, just to try and add some shadows in between. Again, smaller dots going horizontally, smaller dots at the bottom and towards the top, slightly bigger. But now I'm just using slightly squiggly motions as well because I want the impression of the shadows underneath the clumps of leaves. That's why I like using the airbrush. It's just such a simple way to get really good, effective results. And say I'm not particularly good with an airbrush. I don't know how to use it properly for detailed work. I couldn't do a fully airbrushed piece by any means, but it's perfect for what I need behind my colour pencil drawings, and if I'm doing my acrylic paintings as well, just to give me the nice soft backgrounds and the soft transitions there in a really quick and easy way. So a bit more green is going in now in between. Trying to build up because it does still need to look like there is grass in there. I want it to look like those leaves are on a grassy background. So just where I'd lost a bit of that, I'm adding that back in again. And I'm just keeping on layering until this is going to look how I want it to look. I'm adding a few more white dots in there now, so I want to build up a bit more colours with a bit more of the yellows and the oranges. So again, as they're not going to show over my greens, going back in with some more white so that I can paint over that again. And I'm not losing the background really that I've already put in. I'm just adding more layers. It'll just give a bit more depth to the piece when it's finished. Because I like lots of layers. I think it adds a lot more to my work. But again, that's just how I like to work. It doesn't mean that's by any means the right way. It's just how I like to do things. Again, adding a bit more of a yellow tone in there. I was just trying it out on my piece of paper at the side first. If you're not sure, always test it out before you put it on your work. It saves you a lot of bother. So I'm not going to ruin anything if it's not quite the right colour. I'll just go over it, but it just saves me a bit of time. And so if you're using an airbrush, just do make sure you've protected anything that you don't want the airbrush dust to land on. I've got a fairly new drawing board I've attached this painting to, and I really didn't want it ruined by the airbrush. That's why I've got so much tissue and tape around it. They're coming in now with a bit more of a reddy tone, sort of reddy orange, to really, really boost the look of autumn. I want to make sure it does, as I say, look like it's an autumn scene. Those are autumn leaves in the background on grass. I don't mind if it looks like autumn bushes, really. It doesn't have to be specifically grass that you're seeing when you see it, but I want to give that general autumnal feel. Now, I forgot to turn the camera back on, so I've missed a little bit, but all I've been doing, I just added a bit of red and then went over that again with browns and back with yellows ochre now. I'm just adding the final few details. Now my finished painting doesn't look this dark. It's a difference between the lights and the fact that the paint is still a bit wet. So it is slightly more muted in tones. Not a lot, but slightly more muted in tones than the result that you're seeing here under those strong easel lights. Final step now is to remove the frisket, and you'll see the nice, perfectly preserved picture underneath. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please leave me a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon. That way you'll be notified of any new content that I post. For now though, bye guys.